Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I meant to include this comment in my last video. So, two videos ago, I covered somebody was basically saying, why can't you believe in heaven and also reincarnation? And they're both based in faith, and I had a bias against uh, Christianity. And somebody wrote this comment that I saw yesterday. You can't cherry pick the Bible to fit your worldview. Context is everything. And there was a comment right underneath there that person says, like Christians do. But the issue here is, like that's just silly. Because the issue with the Bible is simply this. I don't have really, I have the Old Testament, that whole religion in the Old Testament is, I don't want to call it satanic, but it's really demon worship or something. It's blasphemous because it misrepresents God as a angry, narcissistic, sociopathic dude. That's how God is presented in the Old Testament. Petty, vengeful, immature, Trump-like. Just all these things. And so, and there's weird shit in that book. Like there's, you know, um, and this is just any number of things. But King David was wanting to marry the daughter of a king. And the king said, well, bring me back 100 Philistine uh, foreskins. And um, David's a go-getter, so he went and got 200, and he brought 200 foreskins back to his proposed father-in-law so he could marry his wife. Like, you can't tell me that's not weird, right? Like, how is that the word of God? And so that's the issue. The Bible is not the word of God. Like, that's just not, it's an okay spiritual book with good things in it. And a lot of them were, about the time in which Jesus lived, right? So, like, there was things, the flat earth stuff. So, if you're going to debunk something, if you're going to debunk the round earth theory, and you have a theory but it involves the firmament, then you're pretty much going to lose everybody with any common sense, right? Like, like if you start talking about the firmament, you used to say firmament 3 times and you go to heaven, right? Like it's just there's stuff in the Old Testament and in the Bible that's just dated because people didn't know stuff. Like people didn't travel, they didn't understand. They were living. I don't want to say primitive lives because the people back then were more sophisticated and better than the people today. People have regressed because of technology, but we have knowledge that they didn't have. And we have the ability to fly and things like this, right? And we have the ability to travel around the world, and there's all this sophisticated knowledge, and we have ways of disseminating information to now with computers, but before books and scientific discoveries. And some of the science is real, some of it's made up, and some of it's just incomplete, but it has illuminated a lot of the primitive ideas and superstitions and things that used to exist, right? And not that I think people were less than then. There was some I guess there was back in, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, the average person had 30,000 words of vocabulary, and now they have we have 3,000, right? So things like that. We've regressed in various ways, but our knowledge base and some of the things that we, our worldview is different. Like we've expanded our consciousness in different ways to be more than just the village we lived in. And those people were better people in some ways, many ways, but we have a better understanding of things in other ways, right? And I watched that movie, The Heretic, which was a very interesting movie for being a horror movie. Like, I just don't like horror movies, and there's a little creepiness in there, but it's really about religion and control, and it's kind of interesting. Like, a well done movie. Like, and there was some girl who's, you know, I mean, girl, she's probably in her 30s, but like as you get older, everybody's like a kid to you, right? Like, it's hard to differentiate. But she was a former Mormon, and I listened to her take on the heretic because it involves Mormonism. And, and then a couple of her videos came up. I've listened to some of them. They're kind of interesting. But some of the stuff that this guy, Joseph Smith, and his people made up, to create Mormonism has been disproven. It doesn't age well. And that's the thing about bullshit stuff. It doesn't age well. It might work for the primitive people or the, unsophisticated people that it was intended for in a certain region of the world at a certain time period, but it doesn't translate well, right? Maybe 5,000 years ago, it was, or whatever it was when David was around, it was okay to take foreskins from dead people, right, that you killed. You know, it was okay to take your enemy's foreskins. But in 2025, it's weird as fuck, right? Like, you just killed the guy. You got to cut off his foreskin. I mean, and bring it to your father-in-law. Like, that would be a demand of your father-in-law. Bring me 100 foreskins. Like, just stupid shit. Like sacrificing Abraham, sacrificing his son. These types of things. So, the Bible is not the Word of God. It is a book with some spiritual principles in it, right? Jesus was a spiritual person, but he wasn't the only spiritual person, and he wasn't the most evolved spiritual person. Like, he had an interesting story, and they, have hijacked things from other religions. They've got a couple of interesting comments from various people here. This person, one person wrote this. Well, let me read this other one first and come back to this one. This is the one I want to read first because of where I am in the narrative. In Judaism, the practice of sitting Shiva is from the Hindu god Shiva, the god of death, really destruction. So he took that from India. The Catholics' rosary came from the Malabids in Buddhism, which also came from India, and Hinduism. Christianity has taken ideas from religions that are much older. Great subject, Paul. Yeah, it is something where religions and spiritual knowledge is not owned by one person, and the majority of these movements, so in the Sajmark system, Master Charji was St. Paul in a previous life. And he went to a Christian school and had a connection to Christianity. He quoted Christianity quite often. And, and his deathbed, he actually came out and said it. Like, people kind of knew it, but he never said it sort of officially. But he had a past life memory of waking up, on the road of Damascus. And he had said that if it wasn't for St. Paul, Christianity wouldn't have been saved. Like, it would have disappeared and been reabsorbed by Judaism or something. Like, to stand alone its own religion, it was the work of St. Paul, who never officially met Jesus, right? And, I never thought much of this, but I saw this. Peter Jennings did an excellent report on the dead newsman. Peter Jennings put together a report on ABC News about St. Paul. And it wasn't about him being a saint. It was about him as a man. And his work as a person, like what could be documented in terms of a news story, was exactly what Charji did for Sajmark. Like, what he did for Christianity, he did for Sajmark. Organization. I couldn't believe the similarities. Like, when I watched that, I was like, oh, yeah, And it really, kind of changed my mind, or just deepened my understanding of, like, past lives. Like, he played a role for Christianity, and then came back as, as a role in Christianity, he was like a saint, but then he came back and he was even better, a better version of that. And Babaji, the second master, was Patanjali, the father of Astanga Yoga. And what he did as Patanjali, he did much better as Babaji. So there was an evolution there. And Charji had been a follower of Babaji as Patanjali. So he was his disciple in that life and then in this life. So there's a past association there. And many of the people who do the meditation were also a part of the Ramakrishna Swami Vivekananda thing, the Ramakrishna mission or whatever it's called. And so they had, done this work before. They had been a part of that kind of stuff, right? But these souls are, around these spiritual movements. The Mahabharata, there's many people who do Sajmarg who are part of the Mahabharata. I have had sort of a past life experience of being one of the figures in the Mahabharata, but there's a number of people that were there that do Sajmarg. But the point is that spiritual movements, souls who play one role in one movement, or they evolve to something higher in another movement, they're all together, right? There's a collection of souls that work together for the upliftment of humanity, or these who have predisposition towards spiritual life. And so there's no sense of, like, this is where religions want to have ownership, right? They want to claim that they have the teachings, but they've pilfered teachings. The religions themselves pilfered the teachings. The teachings are freely available, right? But now they've copyrighted somebody else's discovery, right? That's the shittiness of religions, where they've taken a variety of I don't know if the word eclectic is appropriate here, because I'm not totally sure what it means, but something where they've taken all these various teachings from, and discoveries from previous religions and spiritual movements, and then they claim them as their own, because they want to exclude theirs. Like, this is some thing that we own, and we can, we're the only ones who can give you this and this kind of thing. And that's where religions fail, right? Like, religions fail because they're not being honest with you that there is, a team of souls, and they're working for God. Some of them have incarnated here. Some are just like disembodied souls that watch over this planet, that are working for the spiritual upliftment of humanity. And humanity just consistently fails, right? Humanity just, this version of human beings, there's been different kinds of people here. People that used to live thousands of years. And, even those souls who became, wise and mature, and, after, a certain number of years, you lose, some sense of, like, how, life isn't as attractive or addictive, pleasurable. Like, the sensory stimulation is overwhelming at first, coming from a soul where you're, living in an etheric, abstract universe, as opposed to being in a physical universe where there's, like, you feel stuff, like you have, you feel physical sensations, and you have these senses, and you have this, beautiful, stimulating world that's, interesting, and that's, going. It's like being in a video game and getting sucked into the, the illusion, right? But after so many years, it like wears out. After so many lives, it's just not as alluring, right? It should be like that. It is, for people, but still, there was an attachment to this planet. A lot of people didn't want to be liberated. A lot of people just want to come back, life and enjoy life, physical life, and their souls, have a different purpose. And so, that's why there's been failure, for whatever reason, on planet Earth for spiritual movement. Like, there's a period of time where you're living life on planet Earth, and you're learning whatever you're supposed to learn here. And then there's a time to graduate. But refusal to graduate, it's like somebody who, there's these people who never want to get a job, and they spend their time, they've amassed, 3, 4, 5, 6 different college degrees, doctorates, and they keep on going back to school, and, they like the academic process, but they're at some point you got to go out and get a fucking job, right? You got to go and, you should always be learning, you can still learn in your chosen field, right? You can still learn, and you should be learning, but, it's something where you're needing to move on at some point, right, to something better. But the attachment to living life on planet Earth, I just went to eat breakfast, do some stuff. But, the the attachment to planet Earth and whatever it is, even negative attachment or victim consciousness or whatever it might be. Human beings just still want to move on to something else, and so that's they're and a predisposition to go towards the lower and reject the higher. So that's the problem. That's the human. That's what's gone on here, and I think you can see it playing out on every level. And with that, you have religions that promise you something like an afterlife or whatever in a way that you kind of probably know it's bullshit, but it's okay. I got that covered, right? Because there's a fear of death, like what's going to happen to me when I die. Like there's a fear of no longer being you, right? This thing. There's a finality, right? There's a everything that which is connected to the material world and your physical body, will end at some point, and you'll not be here. And if there's no soul, that's it, right? So it's whether there's a soul, whether the soul thing's a bullshit thing or not, which is, you can have some experiences, like I said in that video, some familiarity with people, places, things, some, past life memories, some premonitions of a future, and you can meditate and connect to the etheric side of yourself and understand that there's something beyond your physical body. And when the first time I saw, like a dead body was my grandfather. I was 10 years old or whatever. I thought it was younger. I remember it being younger, but I looked it up. And I was like 10, almost, maybe 11 years old when it happened. And, like, I'm not sure when it was. That's why I don't know precisely, but I was 10 or 11. And, I looked at my grandfather's body and I'm like, he's not there anymore. Like, it's an empty corpse, right? And the life force that was animating the body is gone. And, you can kind of see these things. And so, and then having, interactions with a soul after the person's passed away, people have experienced that, right? And so, there's proof of a soul, but it's not the kind of proof that's concrete. It's there, but it's very subtle because the soul is subtle. And so it's not going to be some material proof. Like when they try to weigh a body before and after the soul, soul has no weight. Like a soul is defined, the Atman, the original word for the soul is, at some point people went from not knowing about the soul to knowing about the soul, which was a huge discovery, right? But once you learn about the soul, and we take it for granted, you grow up in a religion, people don't think about it. But once you realize you have a soul, then it kind of is important to create some sort of dialogue and relationship with your soul, right? And there's none of that in Christianity and most religions, because once you do that, like, you don't need the religion. So the religions, what Christianity has is a book, and that's the problem. There's no method. There's a book. There's no method. If you do A, B, C, and D, you get to heaven, right? There's nothing. You have a book, and the book says you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, but that's just fucking words, right? People say I do. Well, I'll be with you for the rest of your life, and then have 3 more marriages and say the same thing each fucking time, right? No, this is the one. We're gonna make it. So. People make pledges and vows, and they make proclamations, and they say shit all the time and don't see it through, right? How many times have people reneged on a promise, right? And you could go to any Christian. I'm not shitting on Christians. This is just human nature. It's just an example. But you could go to any Christian that says that Jesus is their Lord and Savior, and there are moments where you're like, is Jesus your Lord and Savior now? When you did that thing, was Jesus your Lord and Savior then? Right? Huge mistakes and things. I have an advantage because I had a living master. I had somebody who was, a highly spiritual developed person, and other people that did the Sajmark system that were saints. Like, you go in their house, and it's like going into an ashram. Like, if you've ever been to places, there are places that have a spiritual charge. There's a Peace Pagoda in Massachusetts I used to go to, and you walk up this mountain. It's sort of like a circular path, beautiful trail, and you get up to the top, and there's this cool Peace Pagoda. It's Buddhism or some shit. I don't know. I didn't even know, but it's before I started doing Saj Marg, and I could feel the energy there. Like, there was a difference there. Like, there's places that are just holy places, Some of them are natural, like they're just naturally a place where you can go and feel God's presence. And there's, idol worship in temples and things that have a spiritual charge, have a spiritual condition, and you can feel the energy. And at sunrise and sunset, you go out, you can feel God, like there's a balance in the universe. And it's a great time to meditate. It's a great time to feel God's energy. And people have that energy, right? You're around them, and you can feel that energy, right? You can feel the presence, and it changes everything when you've had that experience. It's a good experience to have, where someone who radiates this energy. And like I said, people in Saj Marg, it wasn't just the master. You go to their house. There's a guy in Texas, this old Indian guy, and we stayed at his house, my family and I. And so there was other people. There's a woman who just lost her husband, that was American woman, and few maybe that was it. I don't know. I think it was just us and her, and we were like, oh my God, this guy's a saint, right? You wouldn't notice the guy, but when you went to his house, you could feel the energy, and he was just this really nice, good host. It was in Texas. He was an Indian guy that moved to Texas, and he did Saj Margus. And I'd see the guy every year after that. And every time I talk to him, like, I look at him like, Jesus Christ, this guy's getting it done, right? This guy's really an example of what Saj Mark can make of you. He's dead now, but there are people like that. I've known a number of them. There's a guy who's a preceptor in L.A. I was traveling to India, and he met me at the L.A. airport. I was coming from New Mexico, so I was going from New Mexico to L.A. to to Taipei to Singapore to India, and it was a long fucked up trip. And then I had to travel again because the plans changed. But this guy, through somebody else who had helped me, sort of an elder person in the mission, he came to the airport. This guy's with a job and a family, right? He shows at the airport at midnight and gives me a sitting in the concourse, like an individual sitting. And, in the, I mean, this is back before the security, it was like 1993, 1995. And so, yeah, like it was shit like that, right? And so, like, people would do that. Like, there was a guy who used to drive all the way, where I lived in 5 hours away from D.C. He would drive from Washington, D.C. and give sittings to people because there's no preceptor out there. I mean, the commitment and some of the, just these people were amazing. Their level of participation. Like, there's just these, really higher developed souls that I've met, like really great people. And, then they have this energy to them, and like they live like a spiritual life. And being able to experience that, that's another, validation of, people who have a relation with divinity and how it feels. But there's a method in the Sajmark system. There's, the first master of the system didn't have a method. People would come to his house and he would prescribe mantras and some other, shit like that. That wasn't, that was okay for the time. But it wasn't until he had his successor, who he died, and after 13 years after his death, this guy Babaji was announced that he was his successor. Babaji didn't announce it; this other guy did, and they like stood up at group meditation, and the preceptors who was given Babaji sitting said, "Hey, this guy's the next guy," and people were like, "All right, whatever." Only 5 people stayed with him from his Lology's time, but he was instructed to give a method of cleaning and transmission, and it's kind of one of the unique parts of the Sajmark system. There's a method, there's a system to help you to connect to divinity within you. And then there's this yatra, this journey of your soul that goes on, and there's like layers and accomplishments and experiences that you have along the path. And they can be experienced, right? You can feel it. Like it's just not some, promise of something to come when you die, right? But in Christianity, there's just a book, and that's the problem. It's not. It's the book has to be the Word of God because that's all you got, right? That's all you have is a book. And I'm not shitting on like the whole thing. The religion itself sucks, and this isn't about Jesus. This is about like how do you achieve a spiritual goal. This is the most important point. I don't want to spend a few minutes on this thing, but I got a few more comments to read. But that are about this subject. These are, people who had positive association with my video and their own experiences, right? But you have a goal, which is to get to heaven. But it's not even really a good goal. Like it's just Well, I'm going to die. What happens when I die? Well, you go to this place, this really great place called heaven, right? This is what they sell like to these so-called terrorists, right? 70 virgins and a mule. They like you get all these virgins waiting for you up in heaven, which I don't know what you're going to do with them, right? You don't have a dick, right? Like, what do you? Well, I mean, like it's a, it's like what? Like, what if one of these they're trying to recruit some guy and he says that to him? What am I going to do with 70 virgins without a dick, right? um, but yeah. And sometimes they have like these, and again, I don't know how much is it even true, the suicide bomber stuff, but they have these women. What do they say to the women, right? What do they get, right? What's waiting for them? And so, you have this idea of like a vacation land where everything is great and everything is happiness and you're just blissed out. And, it's a great idea, but that's not how anything works. Because when you are a disembodied soul, then all you do is work for God. I mean, you can, go around doing mischief and, you can still be wayward, but it's harder to do that without a mind and a body. There's these souls that are, lost souls, like who are, aren't, I don't know all that much about it, so I'm not going to talk about it here, but, there's souls that aren't, great. Like they're stuck in some lower vibrational situation, which you could call hell or whatever it is. And they can't right the ship, right? They can't, whatever's happened to them, whatever's, bad decisions in lives or whatever's happened to them, they've lost their way. But that's, that is whatever it is. But every other soul is just working for God. You have an automatic, there's no freedom of choice in that sense, and there's just, you get assignments, and you don't have a physical body, you don't get tired. Imagine how bored you'd get without a physical body in a heavenly place where you can't experience pleasure in heaven the way that we do on earth. There's no sensory stimulation. So, it's just a bullshit story, right? But people are worried about, what happens to me when I die. We have this soul, and when the soul goes to heaven, everything will be great. You just, accept this guy as your Lord and Savior. And this is the book. Oh, yeah, and anything you did bad before, he died for your sins, so you're set. You're taken care of. You got it all. It's just something they sell to you. It's a bullshit thing, right? And, again, if that's what you can attain, if that's the highest level you can attain, sure, like do that. Like I'm not, like I don't have anything against, sincere people doing that, but, you're being lied to, and to whatever extent, if you do it sincerely, even if you're being lied to, you're going to get something because you're forming the idea of God and you're trying to be a good person. You're working to be a good person. And, if the people who are good, solid Christians, you see it. You can see Christians who have a connection with God. It's beyond the book. It's beyond the bullshit religion. They formed a connection with Christ, right? Because Christ was a higher developed soul. But the Sajmark system, it's very, it's not like that at all. The idea is that you have a soul and you're on a spiritual journey here. And most people are lost and going in the wrong direction, and that is whatever it is. But you are going to have future lives and you've had past lives. And this Sajmark system is something new that's being tried to help people who don't want to embrace their spiritual nature do that. And it has these two instruments or tools called, transmission, which is the divine essence of God at the highest level that a human could achieve, this loving energy that everybody craves, and then the cleaning to clean away anything that's obstructing your path. And, it works. The system works for, not everybody feels it, but it works. Some people are more sensitive to it than others. But, it's whether you're going to accept your spiritual nature, which is the big thing, which hasn't happened before. And so it's the newest, attempt at helping people do something that they don't want to do, right? So there's no sense of, like, this is it, heaven and hell or any of these kind of things. Like, this is, what you should be doing. This is why you're here. You're here for your soul. Your soul has a purpose, and your soul's purpose can be enhanced by the system. And for people who embrace it, to whatever extent, I mean, if the fourth master of the system shit the bed, that's not a good sign, right? Like, and more people fall even with these experiences that you have. I mean, there's just legitimate experiences that are, profound experiences that everybody has as they do the system, and still will choose to go back into the Matrix, like that piece of shit in the first Matrix movie, the Cypher character. He's just tired of, he doesn't have reality. He wants the illusion, like people want the illusion. Anyways, let me read the rest of these comments, and I want to move on from this. I got a bunch of other shit to get to. I think this was a comment from yesterday that I to get to. Oh, this was today. How are you not past 2,000K yet? I know for a fact that there are more than 200,000 insane people. I think in the comment below that, somebody's put a smiley face, 70 virgins and a mule, and with a question mark. That, of course, that's kind of a negative comment, but it was funny. The fear of denying the deity of Jesus is the hardest part to overcome. I love Jesus. He brought me to truth just like he intended. It's hard to break free from the indoctrination of heaven and hell, and Jesus being the only way. Thank you, Paul, for continuing to do God's work and put the truth out there in a more logical way for the folks that have eyes to see and ears to hear. Well, again, this is not, Jesus can still be divine or still be a spiritual person. It's just that, the book thing, right? I mean, it's the religion in the book. It's like, this is all they have. Like the book has to be the authority. Like the book's the authority because they don't want you to do anything else. And that's the problem with religions. They want exclusion. They don't want you looking at other paths. The issue here is that European white people, for the most part, are dominating the material world. The white people from Europe and, I guess in Russia and these areas, they did really well. The Europeans, the English, the French, the Spanish, these, people from Europe, developed weapons and they dominated and colonized other places, right? And do well in the material world. People who have light-colored skin, for the most part, have, developed, systems of material dominance. But there is a lack of spirituality, which these other countries have. People of color, people of, indigenous people, they have more predisposition towards spirituality. India being sort of the prime place just because of its location and history. But, these two, the white people think that they're the best and, we're number one kind of stuff, and don't realize that they're suffering spiritually. And so your religion sucks. Like your religion is very materialistic, right? So here was this other comment I want to get to. I really like this comment. I have no way of verifying what the person says. That's the cherry pick one. And this is the one here. That's not the one. This is the comment here, I think. The soul being created at the time of the body being created was the beginning of reducing everyone down to materialism. And here we are. That's a great comment. Like, I agree with that. I mean, there's no way to prove that, but obviously, it's been that. Like, that's happened. Because Christianity is a very materialistic religion. Like, you look at the very gaudy mega churches and, these cathedrals. I went to St. Patrick's Cathedral. Beautiful place. And the Vatican, they have these wonderful buildings and, amazing properties and, these things. And a lot of gold, a lot of, I mean, it's like Trump-esque, right? These are like Trump stuff, right? Like Trump Tower, gaudy, and and all this stuff. And Christmas is the most materialistic holiday ever, like in the history of the world. I mean, it's just so materialistic, and people, attribute their success to Jesus blessing them, which is another part. But again, it comes from people who are focused on materialism. People from Europe and these people are good at materialism. They're good at the material world, but there's spiritual deprivation. And they have a lack of saints, and, saints are often killed or destroyed or canceled or whatever they are. People who develop the capacity. I mean, that's what happened to Jesus, right? And Jesus was, of course, and that's why they maybe embraced Jesus, because Jesus became a spiritual person in, a place where there was, I mean, the Roman Empire, right, and the, white people from Rome, and then the Middle Eastern people and the Jewish people that were there that were darker skinned, but the religion that was there sucked. It was a bogus religion. Jesus was born in a bullshit religion, one of the worst, because of the way that it presents God as being a prick. And then this stuff that happened with you know, all of that, all the things that went down there, very materialistic, right? Very, it's focused on materialism. And a lot of the concepts are about, war and punishment and sacrifice and death and blood. And, it's filled with blood and, all this stuff, crucifixion and torture and all this kind of fucking materialistic, evil, icky fucking shit, right? I mean, it's in the books, and it's in the history of this religion, and then the persecution of Christians and the way, people were persecuting each other and all that shit, right? It's all, the Crusades where they went and they tried to convert people by force, and the way they treated native peoples and, the Irish and the Scottish and these people and, the other European countries, the way they forced Christianity on them and all this stuff, indoctrinated them and all it's just heavy and gross and shitty and terrible and like really fucking bad. And Jesus is not Jesus is not cool with it, right? Like you're doing it in Jesus' name. The other part about this is when you have a master disciple relationship, it's it's not a marriage, but it's something like even more than that, right? Because when you're like there's a relationship between you and your so-called savior. I mean, this is more master disciple, guru disciple relationship. As a disciple, you have to like not be a piece of shit, right? The gurus, if you have a really quality guru or master, they're upholding their end. If you don't, you have a piece of you have a cult. But if it's a real master, they're upholding their end, like they're doing all they can for you. And you know, what are you doing? Like Babaji once said, "What I'm doing for you is my problem. What you're not doing for me is your problem." I don't know if it was he used the word problem, but something like that, right? So, someone wrote, I told people over and over again, I'm not, a master. I'm not. The line of masters. There's a big difference between what I'm willing to do and what I'm capable of doing. But willing is more appropriate, and what they were willing to do, and what they were willing to do for God, what they were willing to in terms of their commitment. And also, you have to be picked, right? You just can't say, hey, I want to apply for this job, right? Like you have to be picked, and it's you're picked before you're even born. It's not even like something, whatever. But I had people would say, well, even though you don't say you're the master, some person wrote and said, even though you don't say you're a master, I'm accepting you as my master. I mean, some just wrote a random comment like that, and I'm like, well, what makes you think I want you as a disciple, right? Like it's a you can't force yourself. Like it has to be something. I don't want disciples because like I mean I'm not. It'd be a lie. I can't deliver what these other people can deliver. I have some energy and some teachings that I was gifted with. They're not my teachings, right? And some of it's channeled or whatever it is, but it's like plugging into a movement, right? But in that movement, the master of the system has to, I mean, there's the Sajmark system. The master of the system can never renounce you, but you can leave him anytime you want. Like so, like he's got to just be there. Whatever piece of shit things you do, whatever issues you have, he has to continuously be working for your spiritual benefit and upliftment. It's not a good deal for them, right? So when somebody says that they're accepting Jesus as their Lord and Savior, you have a responsibility to be like not a piece of shit, right? Like there's a whole level that people don't think about. Like what Jesus is going to do for you, whatever is promised by the religion. And they can't make promises of Jesus about heaven and things that don't exist, right? The hierarchy in the church can't make promises for their master. And this was something that's very clear in the Sajmark system, that if you're a preceptor or something, you can't promise somebody something on behalf of the master that he can't deliver, because it's just not possible, right? So, like you have to be, I mean, you can't be a piece of shit, right? Like that's, that's why people don't like doing spiritual stuff, because it means you have to get better. Like you're representing something, if you believe in Christianity, then you have to act a way that, Christians don't look bad, right? Like this is what I've said over and over to people who leave stupid comments and they post biblical scripture and do shit that just pushes people away. It's you have a responsibility to Jesus. Like he has a responsibility to you, but you have a responsibility to him to uphold your end of the bargain. And the church makes a lot of promises that they can't deliver. The various churches, I mean, all the religions, all the Catholic religions, and all the Christian religions, and all the the other religions, they make promises they can't deliver, and they don't tell you what you have to do on your end because they don't want you to run away, right? They don't want you to say, hey, fuck this is too hard. And so it's just, it's all bullshit, right? It's just, people don't read the book. I mean, people say they're this, that, or the other thing, whatever religion they do, but how many people actually do it? In the Sajmark system, people would buy the books, especially people in India, but they wouldn't read the books. And they'd still be doing their old rituals and their old Hindu shit that they used to do that has nothing to do with Sajmark, that actually interferes with the cleaning and the transmission. And they didn't even know because they don't meditate, they don't do the practice, but they would show up and they'd ask the master for something and, it's my birthday, master, this kind of bullshit, right? And so, you have a responsibility as a disciple. And, they used to often joke, it's easy to find a quality master, but it's hard to find a quality disciple, which I believe to be a very accurate statement. Okay, so let me get to the rest of these comments here. This person writes, P.S., so it must be a second comment. I got a little job in late June 2024. I play the piano for a small church about 1 mile from my home, one service per week, and it pays well. Easter had me thinking about the very subject. I came out of Christian indoctrination after 59 years, and thanks to you, found Saj Marg. Everyone I love, son-in-law, daughter, grandchildren, do believe like the religion tells them. Actually, they're both pastors and have a church. I appreciate the way that you explain these contrasts. It's a gift. So there's that. And then that was the one I already read. So there's this one. The fear of denying. Oh, that's one I already read as well. I think I read most of these. Is this one here? Yeah, I've read all of these. There was one from yesterday that I was supposed to cover in another video and I didn't. Let me see if this one's here. Paul, accept all miseries are as blessings. Does that apply to all miseries Daji has caused to Heartfulness and Sajmark as well? Well, it's everything. It's a blanket statement. Miseries motivate you on a spiritual level. Pleasure pulls you away from God. People don't think about God when they're enjoying their lives and things are going well. But when they're suffering, that's the first thing. God, please help me, this kind of thing. And so miseries, but that, it's the miseries as divine blessings is much deeper than that. But I can say in terms of my own spiritual evolution, my own spiritual journey, the shit with Daji and my ex, which happened for me at the same time, going through the divorce. I mean, the years of living with my ex, which was, all of it. I mean, these were things that were very difficult to go through, and Daji turned out to be a piece of shit. It was hard for me, but I evolved more spiritually during that time. And so, in many ways, they've helped me, these people, but that doesn't mean they don't suck, right? Like, people suck, and, Trump sucks, but he's doing God's work unintentionally of bringing down a system that is going to, hurt us all materially. I mean, so it's always like that, right? It's a blessing and a curse, a spiritual blessing, but a material curse. But, in terms of miseries as divine blessings, that's what it means. That usually it's something that you suffer that helps you spiritually. And so you can look at it as the person's like a true friend in a way, even though they're not great. They may suck, but what they've done has helped you spiritually. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. So I scrolled down, like I had to the comment came in yesterday. I didn't do a screenshot. I did on my phone. But it's easier for me to read it on the computer. So I scrolled through the comments. And I came to the synopsis of that video from the AI bot. This video discusses the Pope's death, Pete Hegseth's information leak, and compares reincarnation to Christian heaven. It criticizes organized religion, particularly Catholicism, and explores spiritual concepts from the Sajmark system. The AI bots kind of, they're kind of hilarious. They have a certain way. They have a way about them. The AI bots, at least the ones that I've experienced. Okay, so let me go to the other stuff here. Okay, so there's one more thing to add to this. So the most important part about the idea of miseries as divine blessings, I mean, going back to that piece, right, is that um, everything comes from God. And so either there's a plan and there's, you have a script to your life. There's a divine script to your life that's been endorsed by your soul. And everything that's in it, everything that's going to happen, all your destiny, all your stuff is for your betterment. It's what your soul wants you to go through. And, it's a hard thing for people to deal with when things go sucky and they want to feel like a victim. But there's no victimization, no victim consciousness. Everything is supposed to happen exactly the way it happens. And the more you deviate from that, the more that you want out of that script, the more that you do, you get worse and you do low stuff, the more things that are added that are bad, right? The more consequences that you're inflicting on either yourself in this life or a future life. And so, this is it's just the most logical way to understand. If there's God, then there's a script, there's a plan, and everything is orchestrated. So when you're complaining, you're really complaining about God or your soul or both. Really both. You're saying, fuck you, I don't deserve this, I don't need this, I don't want this. Why are you doing this to me? And the answer is because you fucked up in the past life, or you need to experience this. And so if you take it as a blessing, take it with gratitude. That's why I would say and be grateful. It's just the best way, because you have to go through it either way. The shit that goes down in your life, the things that are difficult in your life, are not going away. You can't avoid them. And so the only thing you can do is do your best to accept them and be grateful for them. And then its intensity is minimized. If you keep on getting warned or suffering consequences over and over again, the consequences just build and they get worse each time. And so if you are grateful for them, you learn your lesson, then you don't need them anymore, and they're gone, and you don't have to deal with them. So the best way to deal with anything is be grateful for it. Like, you have to deal with it. It's happening. So you can complain, you can act like a victim, you can feel sorry for yourself, you can do any number of things. Bargaining, anger, the 5 stages of grief, denial, like, you can go through all those things. And, it just prolongs the suffering. Anyways, speaking of prolonging the suffering, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so this is from Glenn Greenwald. He's a Edward Snowden guy. He broke the Edward Snowden stuff. He's considered more of a, I don't know, but he is, I believe, a Jewish guy. I think he's gay and a Jewish guy. A gay Jewish dude. Under the new guidelines released by the National Institute of Health, any medical researchers will have all funds terminated if they support a boycott of Israel. They can support a boycott of any other country, or even other United States, or even other U.S. states, just not Israel. This is the link here, and this is the part that he's highlighted. Discrimination prohibits boycott means refusing to deal with cutting commercial relations or otherwise limiting commercial relations specifically with Israeli companies, or with companies doing business in or with Israel, or authorized, licensed by, or organized under the laws of Israel to do business. Executive with the issuance effective effective with the issuance of notice, the following terms and conditions applies. Recipients must comply with the applicable federal anti-discrimination laws material to the government's payment decisions for the purpose of this. So this is grant money. By accepting the grant award, recipients are certifying that they do not engage in and will not, during the time of their award, engage in discriminatory prohibited boycott of Israel. And so, if you're a Trumper, Trump owns you and Israel owns Trump. So bow before Israel. Like, this is what it is. Trump is, his number one handler is Israel. Like, his his bullshit things that he does, all of it stems from his relationship with Israel. And again, this is a gay Jewish dude who's publishing this, right? I mean, he's a liberal guy and a journalist. I don't know what he does in terms of his religious practices. But I mean, this is, there's Jewish people that are upset by this. They know it's bullshit, right? This is how much Israel owns the presidency because the other guys were good for Israel too. I mean, they're all, especially ever since JFK, and we know what happened to him. And every president since then has been very good to Israel, and even before then. But we all know, all of it, right? And this is the way that he's treating American citizens who go against Israel. I mean, all the universities and all these things. And their number one thing is to, I mean, it's so fucked up, bro. It's really fucked up. And so bow before Israel. If you're a Trumper, you're going to pull the lever for Trump, you're going to endorse Trump, bow before your masters. Because, Trump is owned by them. They're his number one handler.
Everything that we use in order to make a product. It's a disaster for us. Please stop. We are hurting the very sector that we apparently want to help. Now, don't start a trade war with China. This is water is wet, sky is blue obviousness. And so what's most amazing about the stock rise today is that essentially the headline should be, stocks surge on the Treasury Secretary saying water is wet. All he's doing is entering a room of bankers and saying, hey, everybody, guess what? I've touched water and it's wet. I thought about the fact that China had all the manufacturers.
Just when you thought Marsha Wallace couldn't look any more like a witch, she busts out this laugh. And she's really happy here.
Hey, everybody, guess what? I've touched water and it's wet. I thought about the fact that China had all the manufacturing in the world, and I realized we probably shouldn't start a trade war with the folks who sell us the stuff that we use to make stuff. This is the most obvious, Econ 101, Econ 90, whatever comes before economics.
I thought I needed a PhD, and I just needed to watch The Princess Bride. I love you all more than words. I'm going to ask you to stick around. I have to.
What he says is true. Like, kind of, we all know it now. We should all know it. That Trump's fucked the economy, and it's, and I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff. I want to get back to the Pete Hegseth stuff, and that's going to be part of this. But there's just this celebration amongst these people. Like, these fucking ghouls are so psyched that they get to be right and that Trump is a piece of shit, And again, like their smiles they have here. I mean, this guy's just talking about, a depression and the economic issues. And, Trump's going to be president for the next 4 years. He's eventually going to have to back down to China. Remember, I said there's going to be a video I'm going to put out. Trump gets bitch slapped by China, where China, Trump has to go and bow before them because it's coming, because, it has to. But he's going to do more stupid shit, right? And they're all celebrating it. Like, they're so happy Trump's wrecking the world, and they get to talk about it and be right, So, I mean, think about that. But what this guy said is true. All this stuff is coming from China, which nobody really thought about unless you were, in it, right? Unless you were a small company that's importing things to make something, or you're manufacturing something over in China. But we have, we're so intertwined with China that you can't say fuck you and not expect to collapse the whole system. Like, it's moronic on Trump's part. And it's going to be backlash from the world because it's like, all right, we can't trust America. This is the motherfucker they put in charge, this fucking moron. And these people still won't get that he's a moron, right? I mean, they're still believing in him. I mean, what's it going to take? I mean, there's Trumpers that will never believe, that Trump is a fucking ghoul. So there's a comment that just popped up on my phone when I was taking that video from my phone, which I copied off the TV, and yada, yada, yada. And I thought I would just read it here, even though it was more from the introduction. Is it possible if someone feels horrible from a past life at a certain location, not wanting to be at that location, feeling bad vibes, and then feeling comfortable and peace at another location? I always felt like I never belonged, even to the family I was born with. Well, certainly that would be an indication of evidence for past life. Because where would that come from, right? Like, that's what I was saying in the video. Like, if you're saying that if you feel weird at a certain place, or you feel good at a certain place, why would that be? Like, why would that be? If you have no experience, if it's your first time being there, or, I mean, the place where I grew up in Connecticut is just not well suited for me. Like, I just did better everywhere else. We would travel from Connecticut down to Florida, and pretty much every state past New York, New Jersey area, going down from, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, I just felt better, like almost immediately as we were driving through them. And we'd stop at a hotel or something like that. These were places that I just thrived. I've lived or spent time in all these places later on. Every one of these states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, I either lived there or spent significant time in those places. And, it's just, and places I've lived in out west, and there's just some places that you're just more suited for and more significant in your life. Other places that you're just not supposed to be there. It's like the place is throwing you out of the place. You're not supposed to be there. And there's people like that too, right? So, past life is probably one of the only real logical understanding of that kind of phenomenon, that you've been to those places before and it's part of a plan, and the people and the place that you resonate with is part of where you need to be. And when you're not where you need to be, it is, there's elements of it that are trying to warn you and say, stop, break up with this person, quit this job, move this over here. Like, you're just ignoring these things based in fear or based in, complacence, or just not having enough energy to deal with a problem. And so a lot of places you're going to feel low energy, like just real low energy, and then you feel weakened and, all the rest of it. Okay, so let's get back into the other stuff here. One more short comment here. Person writes, I love how you dissect Christianity without discrediting it. If anything, it's quite the opposite because you treat it like historical fact. People say that Christ didn't exist. And, or he isn't a saint or whatever. And what Christ did or didn't do, or what Christ was or wasn't, has no basis in what came after by these motherfuckers. Because, these people that take religions and turn them into something for their own personal gain and profit. Like, that's two different things, right? You have to separate Christ from the people that, hijacked his movement afterwards. Like, you can't, the same thing is happening with Saj Marg. Just because Daji's a piece of shit doesn't mean that everything that happened before sucked, right? There is some level of, charge. He picked this guy, so there's, some of that's on him for whatever reason, right? And, like, all of it being part of a plan is another thing. But, you can't discredit, like, marriage and women or men because you married a piece of shit, right? Like, you can't discredit all women or all men because you have bad experiences with them. Like, there's people like that living room scene where there's all these disgruntled divorced women and Jerry Maguire, right? The lead woman's character's sister. And they have these meetings and they just talk about how men suck. This whole thing is a living room scene that has to, significant to the ending of the movie. But, just because you've had bad experiences doesn't mean that marriage sucks or that all people, who are of the opposite sex suck. You might have 3 bad experiences and a shitty dad, or a shitty mom or whatever, and formed your relationship or some past life thing. But that doesn't mean that everyone else is bad, right? So it doesn't mean all Christians are bad or, like it's demonized. People want to demonize and put things in a category, but it's never that. It's never that simple, right? There's, there might be whatever merit there was with Jesus. His spiritual accomplishments don't retroactively suck because the people that hijacked the religion wrecked it later on, right? And so you have to make this, distinguish between the two. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so something popped onto my YouTube feed, and it was a video from Stephen A. Smith saying, well, I have to deal with this thing with Shannon Sharpe. And Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe are, they're both on First Take now, and they both try to yell louder than the other person. It's kind of annoying. It's hard to watch. So when I heard that Shannon Sharpe had a crisis, I clicked on it. And we're going to get into the stuff with Trump here in a moment. I want to cover this first because it has everything to do with everything. And so I was doing something, maybe going for a while. It was playing in the background. So I listened to the whole thing. It was like 20 minutes long. And so Shannon Sharp is being sued by the lawyer and a woman that sued Jay-Z and Puff Daddy, saying that they had sexually abused a young girl. And later on, the suit was dropped. And so this guy's also sued, I can't remember the football players, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was accused of sexually mistreating, abusing various massage therapists, like 25 of them in the Houston area. And he settled most of the cases, so admitted that this happened, right? And so this guy, this attorney, is known for shaking down particularly African American men. Maybe shaking down or being a legitimate lawyer, who knows? It's like both things are true. And so this woman, this clearly looks like a shakedown, because this woman is an 18-year-old fans-only model that dated Shannon Sharp for a while. And, this isn't a criminal case. They're asking for $50 million. And they dropped this. Shannon Sharp was supposed to sign a $100 million contract like today. And this thing dropped over the weekend, or like yesterday. And so, like, he was about to get a bunch of money. They probably threatened him and said, we want $50 million or we're going to, sabotage you getting this contract, right? Because he's got a successful podcast. He's very annoying to listen to. So, I mean, I think there's a shakedown, but if he gets canceled, it is not going to bother me one bit, right? Club Shay Shay. And he seemed kind of gay. I always thought he was, whatever. So they released this audio, which we'll just play it here.
I don't know. Anything I say, you're just going to, get mad at, and you're just going to hang up on me, so I feel like...
So she's tape recording these conversations. So there's a plan here, right? Like, he's just being a dope, dating an 18-year-old girl, barely legal. He's like, probably close to 40 in his 40s. And she's taping this. So she's working him for, a $50 million payday. And he delivers.
I'm not going to hang up on you. Here's what it is.
What does that even mean?
Nothing yet. You want to be a to me now, so.
I don't want to be... Don't manipulate me.
Oh, Lord have mercy. If you say that one more time, I'm going to choke the shit out of you when I see you.
Oops. But apparently it's something they were both into, because this part.
I don't know. Anything I say, you're just going to...
Oh, there's a part at the end. I listened to a different audio where, let me find that one. So that was the, they cut it off. The Daily Mail cut it off. This was the extra part.
One time, I'm going to choke the shit out of you when I see you. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to be choked.
I don't want to be choked.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. So, does that mean she's asked to be choked before? But, she's obviously setting him up, right? And who knows what else she has on him. But she could have got the guy engaged in doing some things that now are going to cost him money. So he went on and released an audio saying it's a shakedown. This lawyer shakes down rich and famous black guys, and this guy's doing it to him, and that they want $50 million, but what they're doing is getting sued for defamation. And so this happened, right? And so, it seems, who knows what went on between them, but at least some of it is, she's looking for a payday, right? $50 million is a lot of money for whatever he may or may not have done to her, right? In a consensual relationship or whatever abuse there might have been or whatever it might be. And, making this stuff public and immediately disparaging the guy and hurting his ability to make money because, he was still going to sign this contract and then they released this stuff. So maybe he said, no, he's not going to pay, so they did this. Which, is, it's scummy in its own way. We live in a scummy world. So periodically, Two-Face, this is the hammer guy, but also Two-Face. Watch his two sides of his face don't match up here. Two-Face from Batman. These guys, the gloating has gotten worse. Like every once in a while, I periodically check in on the gloating. I point it out from time to time. Like you can focus on any number of things. But here.
Well, once again today, Donald Trump backed down.
Boom, look at, he's really happy. This is happy for Two-Face.
Once again today, the man who always pretends he never backs down, never backed down big time.
Boom, boom, big time, he backed down.
Donald Trump said repeatedly today, and it seemed desperately, quote, I have no intention of firing him. And he was not talking about his unqualified and incompetent Secretary of Defense who shared battle plans with his wife and others, the same Secretary of Defense who promised to stop drinking if he became Secretary of Defense. Donald Trump said nothing today about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He did not defend Pete Hegseth today. He did not attempt to deny any of the reporting from the New York Times and NBC.
See, this isn't really backing down. This is politics. Like they'll say they'll endorse something until they don't, or somebody. And Trump has thrown people under the bus time and time again. And so that's not backing down. Like him, he realized Pete Hegseth is fucked. And there's more shit to come like I covered yesterday. So.
News about the ways that his Secretary of Defense shared battle plans. In fact, no one in the Trump administration, including Pete Hegseth himself, to this day, to this hour, to this minute, has ever attempted in any way at all to explain, defend, or deny specifically what Pete Hegseth has been accused of doing in sharing battle plans. Hegseth has insisted the information, the details of battle plans were not classified. There was a time when a Secretary of Defense getting caught leaking sensitive information could have, among other things, rocked the stock market and sent it into a downward spiral. But the stock market has no time to worry about an unqualified and incompetent Secretary of Defense who may or may not have stopped drinking when Donald Trump is directly destroying the stock market in bursts of economic policy dementia.
And doesn't that make you happy? Economic dementia. This guy toured Joe Biden's White House the day he was leaving, slathering all over Joe Biden like he was a great fucking man. And he has the balls to say dementia.
That have created the most uncertainty the American economy has ever seen. And I mean ever seen. Because the uncertainty is...
See, like they're in their heyday. Because they get to be right and they're like, come home to Papa or Mama or whatever. Baby bear. Whatever it is, right? But they want to, something.
Is based entirely on what will one person's whims be tomorrow or the next day or the next week or the next month or the next year. A year is the minimum planning horizon for economic planning and economic decisions in business or in our personal lives. And after destroying the stock market with tariffs that are actually illegal because Donald Trump has imposed them in...
what he's saying here is true in the sense that, like, when this comes out and Trump reverses himself and does whatever he does, fires Hegseth, and, I don't know if I think that's going to happen at this point, but who knows? and then has to repeal the tariffs and things that are consequences, then everyone's going to know they got a shithead for president, and the world's going to know. And then, like, that's got its own issues, right? Because they can't impeach him, the Republican Party, not for at least 2 years. And, they don't want to because he's doing what the controllers want him to do, which is take down America. And so it isn't just fixing what he's done. It's everyone knowing that this guy have no confidence in the guy. I mean, you're going to have a fucking president, if the Trumpers bail on him, or let's say he has 20% Trumpers who still believe in him because they're just, whatever. And he's 80% of everyone else like, this guy sucks. What do we do now? And then he's just up there doing shit, right? Like, it's job, if he's got 3 years and 9 months left to go.
Violation of laws that control the president's use of tariffs. Donald Trump decided that now would be a good time to attack the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, who became the chairman of the Federal Reserve when Donald Trump appointed him in Donald Trump's first term. President Biden then reappointed Jerome Powell. And on Monday...
Oh, this is what he's saying about he's not going to fire him. Like, he always gets around to this bullshit points.
In the middle of the morning trading session on Wall Street, Donald Trump decided to attack Republican Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, in a social media post that left the stock market.
I covered this yesterday.
Reeling under the expectation that Donald Trump was going to fire the chair of the Federal Reserve, or at least try to. And on Monday, Donald Trump said, quote, "There can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now." So there was the president of the United States doing 2 things that no president has ever been stupid enough to do before. 1, predict a recession, and 2, blame it on the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who he was publicly insulting. The trouble for Donald Trump is...
Yeah, he did those things. Hammer Guy's right. He did do those 3 things.
Is everyone on Wall Street thinks Jerome Powell is good at his job, and everyone on Wall Street now realizes that Donald Trump is much worse at his job.
Look at how happy he is.
Than they ever expected him to be. Donald Trump's tariff dementia was bad enough.
Tariff dementia. Okay, so you should never use the word dementia after you endorsed Biden the way you did. Like, you've embarrassed yourself, but people are going to forget about all that shit when things are much worse than they are now. And people go back to the Dems and this mainstream media because they were right, and it's a binary system. And, of course, then it's going to be too late anyway. Tesla profits dropped 71%.
Tesla profits plunging tonight. Elon Musk just reporting a 71% plunge in profits. 71%. As he rails against Trump's tariffs in a call going on right now. You will hear him in his own words in a call that Outfront has just obtained. Also breaking new details on Pete Hegseth's, what he's thinking, his strategy, what he's doing. As chaos is erupting inside the Pentagon that he is leading. One person telling CNN he's in full paranoia, back against the wall mode. And Trump's baby bonus, the administration reportedly coming up with ways to push women to have more babies, including a perk
baby bonus
like $5,000 a kid. Or even a medal if you have 6 or more, which is reminiscent of some odd times in history. Let's go out front. Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett, and out front tonight, the breaking news. Elon Musk's empire suffering a major blow tonight with...
It's shuffering? I hope it's not shuffering.
Profits plunging... Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett, and out front tonight, the breaking news. Elon Musk's empire suffering a major blow tonight with profits plunging more than 70%. And Musk, just moments ago, in a call...
71% more.
...all that we've obtained, admits this reason as to why.
There's been some blowback for the time that I've been spending in government with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. There are some challenges, and I expect that this year will be... there'll probably be some unexpected bumps this year.
This earnings call that's going on right now from Tesla. There will be more bumps, he says, because even though Musk
Again, who's leaking these audios?
tonight said he is keeping his word and stopping his full-time work for Trump and Doge next month, which he is required to do with his role as a special government employee, right? So that's what he's already said he was going to do. The truth is, the headline may not be that he's stepping aside as he was saying he was due. It's actually that he is not going anywhere.
I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so.
A day or two.
So, the thing is, this is how fucked this is. Because when Trump won the presidency, I would have thought buying Tesla stock and SpaceX and Twitter stock would have been a good idea, right? Don't you think Elon Musk would win if Trump won? And so this is how fucked Trump's economic policies are, that Tesla stock has plummeted by 71%, or profits. It's a disaster for him. And he's in a high-level governmental position where he's, has influence in the government, and yet his companies are doing poorly. Like, when does that ever happen? Trump's stock boomed. I mean, Trump, in terms of his True Social, that's worth a couple $2 billion now. And it kind of sucks, right? It's a Twitter knockoff. And just because he's president. And so, they're going to go public. He's going to walk away with 2 bills. And Trump is making all this money from crypto. He invested in a lot of crypto stuff. And crypto is down. And crypto was exploding when Trump first won. It went over $100,000. So Trump has done a lot of pro-crypto stuff. He's done a lot of pro-tech stuff. And yet these businesses are imploding. So that tells you everything you need to know about Trump. And he's like he's got the kiss of death, right?
2 a week. 2 days a week out of 5.
Again,
you got it.
Look how happy she is.
Right? That's 40%. That's a lot of time. That would mean for roughly the next 3.5 years, if Trump wants him around, Elon Musk is going to be in the Oval Office with Trump a couple days a week. Now that's obviously significant. And Elon is speaking on this Tesla call, spoke for a majority of the call, in fact, which began about 90 minutes ago. And just to be very clear, Elon Musk being on the call and talking for as long as he has, right? So we're now talking 90 minutes or so this has been going on, is not a business as usual thing. He does not usually get on this call and talk. In fact, in 2021, he said this.
I think going forward, I will most likely not be on earnings calls unless there's something really important that I need to say.
Kaboom.
There is something really important that he needs to say right now. Musk's image as the world's wealthiest man has taken an unprecedented...
Remember this? These two, you think these guys were going to save the country?
hit in an unprecedentedly short period of time. From his controversial behavior at Trump events like Inauguration Day to revelations that he has a lot more children than his known 13 that did not come from some sort of a tabloid. It came from the Wall Street
Does he get a medal? Or is it just for moms?
Journal. And beyond his reputation and image, Musk has lost more than $130 billion since Election Day because of the damage he has done to Tesla's brand by tying himself so directly
$130 million. That's crazy.
to Trump.
Like that's Kanye numbers. Like that's what like Kanye lost.
By Doge. And many investors on that Tesla earning call have lost a lot of money because of Musk this year. Tesla shares have been cut almost in half, in fact, since Election Day, when you look at the highs then, which may be why Musk did something really important on this call. When he talks about something important to say, perhaps nothing more important than this, keeping up his fight against Trump's tariffs.
Tariffs will, tough on a company when margins are still low. I just want to emphasize that the tariff decision is entirely up to the President of the United States. I will weigh in with my advice with the President, which he will listen to my advice, but then it's up to him, of course, to make his decision. I've been on the record many times as saying that I believe lower tariffs are generally a good idea for prosperity. But this decision is fundamentally up to the elected representative of the people, being the President of the United States. So, I'll continue to advocate for lower tariffs rather than higher tariffs, but that's all I can do.
I mean,
So no, he doesn't. Like this was supposed to help people like Elon, car companies, right? But it's not, because if he has to move all his manufacturing stuff, he has deals with China anyway, as do a lot of these other companies. So Trump's fucking all these companies he's saying he's supposed to save, and the powers that be are letting him do it. So there has to be a reason for it, right?
and that's clear and it's measured. It's a lot more calm than calling Peter Navarro dumber than a bag of bricks, which is what he called him on his social media platform recently on the tariff issue. And I want to go now to Dan Ives, Peter Tuchman, and Alexa.
Okay, so remember these guys. These were the Wall Street guys. We're not going to watch them because, that's enough of this thing. But Elon Musk is even, unhappy about the tariffs. So they have this panel here. I forget what the show's called. But this woman, Abby Phillips, she's one of the more calmer people on the news. Like, she talks respectfully. And she has this dude who seems like he, is a closeted gay Republican. I don't know what his status is. I don't know what his, what he says publicly. But, and he's kind of obnoxious. And he's the Republican on a Democratic panel. And his job is to create controversy. And she's usually pretty patient with the guy. But, this is where, like, it's going poorly for him. Like, when it was election time and he was reveling in Kamala Harris's multiple issues, this guy was smug and happy. And the Democrats all kind of saw this thing coming with Trump. And so now the tables have turned and Trump's imploding. And this guy's on his heels. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. This is kind of interesting, the whole exchange. But this is, they're talking about the Fed here.
The Fed, some Republican senators don't agree.
So, Scott.
But I don't.
Right.
I just think the idea that the president should not have any opinion about monetary policy is crazy.
I'm going to give you a third try on this one. Should the Fed's decisions about how they operate, the interest rates, when they raise or lower them, should they be independent of the President of the United States?
Does independent mean they don't take his opinion into consideration?
Independent means no, they don't take his opinion into consideration.
I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. I think the president.
Okay.
I think the president should be able to render an opinion.
I'm going to ask Charlotte, what do you this was taken in by the markets, that idea, right, this week. What was the reaction among people who are making money, they have businesses, they are operating in the financial world to this idea that people like Scott believe?
First, the Federal Reserve sucks. We all know it. But it's what we have, right? This debt-based economy. And the good thing about it is you can borrow money, lots of it, debt, and build things before you create them. So before you used to have to create something and then you would get the money afterwards. So it's much slower process, right? But if you get the money up front, then you can build a lot of things and do a lot of things and advance the technological advancement that we've had, which again are, I think a lot of these things are too fast, right? I think our technology is growing too quickly, exponentially, and it's hurting people because of all the ways technology hurts people. But this is all because of the debt-based economy. If you didn't have the debt-based economy, we'd still, cell phones would still be the size of a shoebox, right? So this is the price you pay for the technological advancement that we've gotten. You couldn't have it with a regular economy, a solid economy, right? In fact, we wouldn't probably have most of the things we have now. It would be much slower, which would probably have been a good thing, but that is whatever it is. And debt-based economy is, built to collapse.
That the Fed should be listening to the president and act accordingly.
That's not what I said. You put words in my mouth. I said, should he be able to render an opinion, and should the Fed take that into consideration?
No.
I think he should be able to have an opinion.
I didn't say anything.
And they should take that into consideration. It shouldn't be the only thing.
I didn't
but
say
he should
anything.
have an opinion.
The president can have whatever opinions he wants.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is whether the Fed should be independent in their decision-making from those
And I said, does that mean they can take his opinion into consideration? And I think they should take the president's opinion into consideration. That's not the only thing. That's
let me see if Charlotte has some thoughts on this.
I think it's very clear from the market's response that the not just the desired outcome. The fundamental law of nature needs to be that the Federal Reserve, the chair of the Federal Reserve, makes decisions on monetary policy that are based on economic data, not on the whims of a president. And that's very, very clear. And I think, the job...
Well, of course that is. That's exactly what it would be. So she's fucking this guy over, right? Like they got him. And he's all triggered, right? He wasn't triggered 4 months ago or whatever it was, November. In October, he was pretty happy. That's when I first saw this guy. He was pretty happy because he knew Trump was like killing Kamala Harris and whatever was going on. And then he remained sort of smug up until Trump started to do crazy shit. Now he's up there trying to defend these things that no one can really defend. Like Elon Musk is one of Trump's big defenders, and he paid like hundreds of millions of dollars. He donated hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump and campaigned for him. And he said that if Trump lost, he was going to be screwed. Like he was going to be in jail or bankrupt, or they're going to take his stuff away or whatever. Like he said it was all or nothing, but it's happening anyway because Trump's fucking a disaster. And so after all that support of Trump, he's got to come out and say, yeah, these tariffs, I wish you'd listen to me and they'd stop them because they're fucking killing us, right? And so that's where we're at right now. These guys are all celebrating Trump being the guy that they said he was. So then there's this dude.
Pete Hegseth is doing an even worse job in one of the most important positions in government than even I thought he would, I gotta say. And that is really saying something.
Look how happy he is.
I mean, keep in mind, right? We covered this confirmation fight day in, day out. This is a guy who had more red flags than a May Day parade.
Boom.
It seemed like every past employee who ever worked for the guy came out of the woodwork on and off the record to talk about how unfit he was to lead the Pentagon. And there were, of course, the allegations of excessive drinking, including on the set of his old weekend cable news show. Hegseth denies having a drinking problem, but he did vow to stop drinking when confirmed for his position. Then there's the fact the guy was basically forced out of two...
I mean, think about that. Like, when you have these kind of issues, the womanizing, the addictive tendencies, and you could just tell by the way he talks. The guy's, it's like he's the prototypical definition of chemical imbalance, right? You can just see the guy, the way he presents, the way he talks. Like there's a desperation there, right? There's someone who's trying to prove himself and just not being able to do it because he sucks. Weakness, right? Weakness of nothing substantial inside him. And so, like, he's not fit for something like of this pressure. Anybody can get out and give their opinions like I do. Like anybody can go say, hey, this is what I think you should do. It's a lot harder to go out there and actually be of somebody making decisions about things that affect, in this case, the military and the people's lives worldwide and all of it, right? And so in a position he was never trained for, had almost no experience for, really had no experience for. And working for a president's the same way. When you have somebody like Trump, there are people like myself who don't work well with other people. And, there's people who just want to make all the decisions and, micromanage and run things. And that's okay if you're great. Like, that's okay if you're great at your job, right? Master Chargy, the third master of the Sajmark system, he micromanaged everything. But he was great at it, right? But no one else could really do what he did. And I knew that there was going to be problems when he left because, when the things got opened up, people were going to do stupid shit. And when he gave people the ability to make decisions and do things, oftentimes they made mistakes. And, that's why he ended up having to micromanage everything, right? And, you can make the same case with Jesus. You have one person that's connected to divinity. You have somebody who's on a higher level. And then they have to create someone who's going to take over. Great king, a great leader, a great, spiritual saint. And, those people are few and far between. And there's other people who are really great working collectively and pulling out the best in other people. And Chargy was actually good at that as well on a different level. Not in terms of the decision makings of the system, but people who are doing volunteer work. And finding out what each person could do and, cultivating that, that ability in them, that's like a really good leader. Trump's one of those people who doesn't work with other people. And he's used to being Mr. Trump, right? He's used to being a billionaire. He used to people kissing his ass and taking what he says seriously. And so, but he's a complete buffoon. And so that's a huge problem. And now he wants to rearrange the presidency and the whole power. Like, he thinks he knows more than the founding fathers. He thinks he's the greatest president of all time. Like, he starts drinking his own fucking Kool-Aid. And so he wants to fire the Fed and do anybody who's not doing his bidding. Like, he wants to be a dictator on day one, which is what the Democrats were saying. He said it. But they, they said this is what he's going to do. And, I was like, well, Trump says a lot of things. But now we can see he does want to be a dictator on day one. He's much different during this term than he was last term. He's pretty triggered. And so these are the kind of people he hires. And then he doesn't like to admit that he sucks. He's like, oh, you have the best people. I hire the best people. I'm good at doing that. But then, these don't look like the best people, right?
2 consecutive conservative veterans organizations where his tenure in charge ended in chaos amid allegations of mismanagement and misconduct. And so now here we are, right? Gave the guy one of the most important jobs in the world. And in real time, we're seeing how that's working out. Because guess what? He's running the U.S. military in the same way. Even before today's exclusive reporting from NBC News about the origins of the classified information he was sending in signal chats, which we'll get to in a second, Hegseth's Defense Department was plainly unraveling. 3 employees that Hegseth himself brought with him to the Pentagon, these were his buddies, his people, his loyalists. They were escorted from the building last week as part of a larger investigation into leaks from the
escorted from the building.
DOD. A 4th employee, John Elliott, a longtime MAGA national security guy dating back to Trump's first campaign, resigned in frustration.
He talks about this guy. He's another fucking creepy looking motherfucker.
He then
plus, so
back to Trump's first
this
campaign.
Is highlights in the guy's hair, right? This has to be highlights. So, I mean, like, they're just, you look at their hair and you're like, that's kind of weak, like, it's not manly. Same thing with Pete Hegseth. A lot of product, a lot of hair gel, a lot of dyes, a lot of primping, a lot of manscape, a lot of, what do they call that? The gender for being in a city or whatever it is, right?
Payne resigned in frustration. He then went on to write an op-ed for Politico describing what he calls his month from hell working for the former Fox News weekend host, noting, quote, it's hard to see Hegseth remaining in his role for much longer. We also learned this week that Hegseth's chief of staff, that's a guy named Joe Casper, has been reassigned within the Pentagon, which, again, not a great sign. Like, we're only a few months in here. CBS News reports that Casper will now handle special projects inside the Defense Department. And that comes as the New York Times reveals new details about Casper's tenure as chief of staff. And I quote them here. One meeting Casper led this month with a group that works with veterans that was offering its services to the Pentagon devolved into a recounting of an evening Casper and a representative of the group spent at a Washington strip club. In all, the Times characterizes Hegseth's leadership as overseeing, quote, a run of chaos that is unmatched in the recent history of the Defense Department. Of course, the most egregious violation we learned about so far, we all know, right, was Hegseth's use of the commercial messaging app Signal to share plainly classified military attack plans. I mean, times and destinations, right? He did that multiple times. First, in that group chat, which somehow included...
Okay, so let's move a little bit forward here.
His wife and his brother, among others. Now, we should note, Hegseth's brother actually worked for the Pentagon. Not like before Hegseth got there, of course. No. Pete Hegseth hired his brother for some reason, because it's the new era of merit. They've gotten rid of all DEI, no favoritism, it's just merit. Can you...
It's just merit.
Do the job.
This is where, like, fucking, it's just bad. Because when you get these people who are just able to tell the truth And that's, when they don't have to make up shit and, embellish shit and, all this other stuff that they've been doing now for years, then you failed. Like, you failed completely. Like, the hypocrisy is off the charts. And, at some point I'll check back in with Don Lemons because I'm sure he's gloating too. It's not because they're great. It's because this was part of the plan, and they're just being dragged along, with this plan of Trump destroying the country, right? But for them to say everything was going to be about merit, and then for him to hire his brother, who's not qualified for his position, and, probably, he looks like he might be a little better than his brother, but still not great, means that that's just a lie, right? They have rules for everybody else, but not for themselves, which is what Trump is. That defines Trump as his, he thinks the rules don't apply to him in every sphere that he gets involved with.
Is your last name Hegseth? As best we can tell, his brother's work experience up to this point has been producing podcasts.
We know that for earlier. So I heard this comment by Trump played on 2 or 3 different, maybe 3 different mainstream media shows, and they missed the biggest part, the funniest part. This is Trump asked point blank about the hearing on the Aliens Enemy Act, but first he talks about Pete Hegseth, and they shit all over the punchline here. They cut out the punchline, the funniest part, the most damaging part to Trump.
Yeah, I do. I really do. I hear they're doing that whole thing again.
I hear they're doing that whole thing again, the media about Pete Hegseth. Now, this isn't the best part. Like, this is the part we already heard. I hear they're doing that whole thing again. I hear, well, it's your job to actually watch this stuff. I hear they're doing that whole thing again. They're just, this is not a media problem. The signal chat was a real issue that affected military confidence among people in the military and the Pentagon. People who take this shit seriously, which I don't. I think it's all goofy, right? I think the whole thing's goofy. I think the intelligence community, all these things, it's for people who want to lie and deceive and do underhanded shit, which is what keeps our government going. Sure, it keeps our economy going. So it's necessary to keep a fucking bankrupt, debt-based demonic system going. But it's evil shit, right? And it's goofy. It's like little boy shit. But for people who take that stuff seriously, and it's kind of serious shit because people's lives are at the line. The implications are really bad. He fucked up. It was a major fuck up. And it's not they're doing this again. They're not rehashing the same story. There's another story that involved 5 Trumpers, 3 of them Pete Hegseth's people. They were his boys, having to be frog marched out of the building by security because they, are turning on a guy who's just that he's their guy. These aren't ex-Biden people. And not just them, but everybody. Like, everybody realized this guy's a fucking bonehead, right? So it isn't the media doing this again. He should have been fired the first fucking time. Then you wouldn't have this problem. This is your fucking problem, right? But then he gets even goofier. This is the part they didn't leave in.
Here we go again. Just a waste of time. He is doing a great job.
Why do you still have confidence?
Because he's doing a great job. Thanks, Ask the Houthis how he's doing.
Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Ask the dead Houthis how they go over there and interview the children and innocent people he bombed over in Houthi. Ask how he's doing. Ask the Houthis how he's doing. Those fucking Houthis. They were dropping bombs on innocent people, right? They killed civilians, which is fucked up. Fuck these guys, for doing that shit. People who probably are much better people than these guys are, right? They drone innocent kids and do shit like that. People who are probably just better people all around than these pieces of shit. President Trump speaks to reporters at White House Easter egg roll. Like, he can't even get the Easter thing in without having to answer controversies about 2 fucking major fuck-ups because he's a fuck-up, right? This guy's such a fuck-up.
There's a hearing today on the Alien Enemies Act in the D.C. District Court. Your thoughts on that, Mr. President?
Well, we were elected to clean up the mess of this country. And we had millions and millions of people come in who are criminals, who are murderers, who are everything you can imagine, drug lords, drug dealers.
See, there's no evidence to support millions of criminals. This isn't like the crime rate in is substantially gone. There's no evidence to support any of the things he says, right? Biden fucked up on the the open borders and there's things, but there's a more complex thing. I talk about people who employ people that come over, right? If you know there's jobs waiting for you, then people go to where they're. If you're starving and you want to work and you need a job and you're desperate for a job, you go to places where you can get one, right? Even in other countries and can't get in there legally, there's a pathway to you get a job if you're illegal, and so they're doing it, right? This whole thing, but he's talking about things that don't exist, like just all these criminal gangs running around the streets. They have that one fucking video of guys with machine guns that may or may not have been in America, of that El Salvador gang or Venezuelan gang or where the fuck it was. They scare people, but again, like I talked about how I have about 5, maybe more. But 5 people, 3 or 4 of them that post regularly on Facebook. I don't go on Facebook. These are people who do the Sajmark meditation that live in the Ukraine. And I looked at all their feeds, the ones I could remember being from Ukraine, when the Ukrainian war broke out, and then maybe a month or 2 later. And then I started seeing them post things, and again, I don't go on Facebook a lot, that had nothing to do with the Ukrainian war, and they're in the Ukraine. Like, the stuff they posted was like American CNN shit. Like, they didn't have anything from their country that they were posting that showed, their personal effects of being in the war. Nothing that they would say, oh, this is how the war is affecting me. Almost to the extent like it wasn't. Like, these may be richer people living in a part that's not a part of the war. But they would post things and they would say, whatever, support Ukraine type of stuff. You have to hit the translate button, right? But the stuff they were saying wasn't like, things that were personal to them. There's lots of things that people have issues with that aren't personal to them. They get fearful about something that doesn't affect them at all, right? And immigration has not affected most people. People who have been robbed by immigrants or something like that. I like to see those people talk about it, and you don't see it ever, right? Like this whole thing that's happened, they're eating the dogs. That was a bullshit thing. Like, blame the Houthis.
They came in from prisons and from mental institutions, and I was elected to move them out, among many other things. And that's what we're doing.
Boom. The Houthis, blame the Houthis. I was actually going to lead with this, and this took a different direction. I'm going to end with this part. I had more stuff to cover about the mainstream media just laughing, but I just, I'm not feeling it. I just don't want to go sit through it. But they are. And they get to because, you've handed them that in a silver platter because Trump sucks. They still suck. It's just that they were right about something that was inevitable. And it wasn't like they were great or they were prophetic. It was just, part of a plan. But here's the fake Christian Barbie truther.
I'm sure you will. And everybody else in the room will be very jealous of you as you're enjoying your rest. All right, let's get to it. We have an individual in our new media seat today. His name is Tim Pool. He's a political commentator and a media entrepreneur with millions of followers, a very big platform. Currently hosts Timcast IRL, a daily news and discussions show, and The Culture War, a weekly podcast exploring cultural and political issues. His programs feature in-depth conversations on topics such as free speech, censorship, identity politics, and societal change, often engaging with a diverse range of guests. He's in Washington today because we are also hosting a local media row across the street in the Eisenhower building, which is
So he's been invited to their thing because he's licks Trump's balls, right? This is a Trump ball licker.
testament to our commitment to bring new voices into the
So they're bringing new voices into the press room.
White House to cover the president and this administration. So, Tim, why don't you kick us off today?
Yes. Many of the news organizations that are represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives, such as the Very Fine People hoax, the Covington smear, and now what's being called the Maryland Man hoax, where an MS-13 gang member adjudicated by 2 different judges, I believe, is just simply being referred to as a Maryland Man over and over again. Now, in an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies.
So he shits all over the mainstream media because he's pretending to be a truther. He's got this frickin' pretentious little hat on top of his little beanie he's wearing there. Are you hot? Are you cold, bro? You cold there, Tim? Tim, are you cold? Is it cold in there? Wearing again, this is how I dress, so whatever. But I wouldn't go to this fucking thing, right? Like some people said, oh, I wish you would go there. I'm not going to go there. Why would I fucking go there, right? Like it's beneath me, and not that I'm great. Like it's just a fucking joke. And Trump's a joke, and everyone's, I'm not going to travel to D.C. I mean, it's just silly. It wouldn't happen. Like I have no interest in doing this. But the reason that he's there, he's a Trump ball licker, right? And he's coming up with this, this bullshit narrative about this guy. When if you were a real truther, if you were a real patriot, you would be concerned about this guy being sent to a prison and Trump saying we have to now go with domestic people. A foreign prison, that someone would be taken out of America and sent to a foreign prison without due process. Now, you could get rid of the guy. Like, if Trump just got rid of him, this wouldn't be an issue. If Trump just took this guy and dropped him in El Salvador, this would not be a story. But they put him in a prison without him committing any crimes, right? And so then, but the bigger issue here is that there is the truth community that many of us collectively built as viewers and as creators. And I've been both a viewer and a creator. I'm not a viewer now because, I'm over the whole thing. I don't watch truth stuff because, I know what's going on. I can make my own decisions. And it's just, the truth community has become an absolute joke, right? And so, from that standpoint, but I was an avid viewer for a long time and a creator, since 2005. And so this thing that's been built was built by like real truthers. And, even back then, Alex Jones was a lot better than he was now. Like he was, he was a shill then, but he wasn't, he had quality guests on, he had real truthers on, and he had a better program. Like he had a real program there. He wasn't as unhinged, and he wasn't much of a shill in the early days. He still sucked, but he was, better then. And like it wasn't having an impact. Like it was unknown. The mainstream media didn't even mention the truth community. They didn't even mention these crazy conspiracy theories, as they called them. There was no term of fake news. It was like Wild West. You could post anything. And it really wasn't anything but people sharing information with no sense of it being affecting the mainstream people. It was just people who wanted a better story, right? And those of us who contribute building this thing, and then you have these right-wing dopes that come in like they're, a part of it, and they're not, right? And they're, they're heavy-duty Trumpers and QBs, and they've wrecked the truth community. And they're the ones being celebrated here because Trump wants people who lick his nutsack, and this guy's willing to do it, right? And so that's why he's there. Like he's, these guys, he's just a different kind of nut licker, right? Like there's a room full of nut lickers, and he's, and he's with his beanie here. You've created this new media seat, so I'm wondering if you can comment on. See, this is not new media. This is, it's insulting to the rest of us in the truth community.
Following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you could comment on that unprofessional behavior, as well as elaborate if there's any plans to expand access to new companies.
Sure. Well, we certainly welcome diverse viewpoints in this room, which is
no, you don't. You don't have like real truthers there. You don't have people who are, who are not Democrats who can ask critical questions. Of you're not inviting like anybody else but Trump nutlickers here. That's not diversity. It's just, they have different, methods of licking Trump's nuts, but they all lick his nuts, right?
The reasons we have you in here, and there's many new faces in this room in comparison to the previous administrations. We want to welcome all viewpoints into this room.
No, you don't.
Welcome unbiased journalists who really care about the truth and the facts and the accuracy, and you rightfully pointed out.
He's completely biased, right? What are you talking about? He's got Trump's left testicle in his mouth right now. What are you talking about?
the Maryland man story, which I, from this podium, when The Atlantic published it, on that very first day, I came to this podium and said, this is wrong. The press in this room have this story wrong, and we have seen...
do you? I thought you were open to all opinions.
More and more evidence come to the table that we have had all along. We were always right. The president was always on the right side of this issue to deport this illegal criminal from our community.
So what about deporting him? He was here illegally. He'd been here a while, so he'd, established roots and, had done work. I mean, he'd contributed to the American system because he held jobs, at least that's according to the story. I mean, again, it's all part of the show. But we do know the guy doesn't have any criminal convictions here or El Salvador. And he's been locked up. And so if you're saying he's being locked up because he crossed the border illegally, then he should be in the U.S. because he didn't break an El Salvadorian law. Like, he doesn't have a criminal history in El Salvador. He doesn't have a criminal history here. And if he's been committing crimes, that's one thing, but you have to convict him of that, right? He has to be convicted to go to jail. If you just start locking people up, this is where the dummy QBs came in and said they wanted people to be rendered, taken out of their house in the middle of the night and brought down to Guantanamo Bay for secret military tribunals because, people like Tom Hanks, right? Because there's some internet rumors about them. You're still not getting anything on Jeffrey Epstein's list and some of these other things that Trump promised because probably a lot of, not only, Trump is on that list, but his pals, this is, the whole thing. Jeffrey Epstein's was, Trump's friend, and a lot of Trump's friends were friends with Epstein. And so, it's a fucking lie. The whole thing's a joke, right? But what you don't want is just lock people up for no reason without due process. And Trump is saying that's okay. And you guys are saying that's okay. And so is this clown. And so, again, this is not a left-right paradigm person or, anybody has any common sense about truth stuff. This is a right-wing piece of shit, just like the rest of them.
And it is despicable to see the media continue to refer to this individual as someone who is...
despicable.
Just a peaceful man living his life in Maryland. This was and always has been an illegal criminal, an MS-13 gang member, and a designated...
There's no evidence that he's an MS-13 gang member.
...foreign terrorist, and the administration maintains our position.
And you guys said that you did the wrong thing. They admitted they were wrong, but then they're saying these other things. And this video is entitled "Just In: Tim Pool outright slams mainstream organization in White House press briefing room when questioned." Mainstream media sucks, but it's better than you. Like that's how bad you guys suck. Where mainstream media is reporting more truthful information than these clowns that are supporting Trump. This fake assassination attempt and all that other bullshit, right? And so inviting this beanie-wearing dude, what is he, a hipster? And so I looked at his channel here. He has 1.4 million subscribers, and he has 120,000 views on this piece of shit video, right?
Several more Democrats are heading down to El Salvador in what I would say is plainly a violation of the Logan Act.
This is his look with the fucking beanie.
But they're really hell-bent on defending this guy who is accused of beating his wife mercilessly.
He's accused of beating his wife mercilessly. So, is he being convicted of that? No, accused. Like, you're admitting he hasn't done anything wrong. Like, he's just making shit up. Yeah, Trump is accused of raping his wife, by his wife in his divorce filings, right? If just accusations, why are Trump's accusations false and this guy's real, right? Like, only because Trump deported him and locked him up. He didn't deport him illegally, but he locked him up illegally. He sent him to a prison he doesn't deserve to be a prison in, which everyone should be, concerned about that, right? Especially since Trump said he's going to do this to homegrown people. What if Biden had done this, to some American, or claimed that he was going to do this? You guys would be going nuts because it's things you're going nuts over. But here's the more substantial piece.
Mercilessly, and has got MS-13 gang tattoos on his hand, says the president.
Said the president. The president knows MS gang tattoos, MS-12, what is it? And so, it's just, these people suck. These aren't alternative media people. And Trump is a fucking nightmare. I mean, even Elon Musk is saying his fucking tariffs are too fucking high. And he really probably means all tariffs, because there's no tariffs that aren't going to hurt lots of business people, lots of small businesses and American businesses. Trump's a fucking debacle. Like his whole, everything he's done has been an absolute disaster. He had like a few things that he did well, and those things are being overshadowed, and they're not really all that important to average American people, like the stuff with the getting biological men out of women's sports. Like, that's one of the good things he did, but that's not going to have as much of an effect as the tariffs are. But this is what they're calling alternative media, right? And there's no sense of being like a sense of accountability, like a sense of looking at yourself in the fucking mirror and looking at what Trump's actually doing and talking about things that are possibly wrong. It's just licking Trump's nuts. As your job is to lick his nuts and then go talk about it on your little fucking podcast, right? This is everything that's wrong about this alternative media. This is why they're going to be censoring people again, because of people like this, people who have just wrecked it. And they have a right to say what they're going to say, because there's freedom of speech, but they suck, and they should be acknowledged that they suck. And this is who Trump's inviting in. This shows you how bad Trump sucks, because how bad this guy sucks, and how bad Trump sucks tells you why this guy sucks, right? Like, it's this coordination of sucking, right? Each person sucks in the shadow of the other person that they're putting out there, right? Of course, Trump wants people like this, because Trump can't handle any sort of truth about himself, and he can't, take accountability for the piece of shit person he is. Anyways, okay, just to wrap this up, a big part of this video's theme is that everyone lies to themselves. People rationalize their own behavior. People have this, we all do this. We all make the things that we do more acceptable than when other people do the same things to us, or, whatever it is, right? We have our own personal prejudices, things that we think are, good and bad, and all these different things. We all have some of that in us, right? We all have some, we're all subjective. We all have some subjectivity. Like, there's no one who's objective completely. And, we all have the things that are more difficult for us to face about ourselves, these things. But some of us are better at it than others. And, there's a lot of people out there that have this binary way of thinking that these are the good guys and those are the bad, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And, it's all based in lies and, twisted narratives and all these types of things. Like, it's all bullshit. Some things are legitimate about pointing out the other opposition. Like, the mainstream media sometimes gets it right about how bad Trump sucks. Like, right now, they're getting that right. And sometimes Trump gets it right about Biden and the people before him and the left and the Democrats. And these people who are right-wing pundits, they can get it right about how bad the other people suck. Like, the only thing they get right is the suckiness of other people. But what they never get right is their own suckiness. They never take responsibility for what they need to change. And I've said this, throughout all my videos. Not all of them, but, it's there. Some of the first, my first realization about these types of things, it had happened right before I started the Sajmark meditation. So I'm at my third attempt at college. I'm in this sort of liberal hippie college that it was a bachelor's degree in human services, and they had long weekend classes, and it taught critical education. I benefited from some of it, right? There were some issues with the school, which like there is with everything else, but I was benefiting from it. And, part of what the curriculum was about Howard Zinn's the People's History of America, which is about the oppressed people's view of history, because history is always written by the victors. And it was, an interesting book. It's, well worth considering. Like, I wouldn't read it again now because I get it, right? In a much deeper way than back then. But, to see how the oppressed people viewed the story, because the people who did the oppressing, the people who did the conquering, they viewed themselves as heroes. So the people that they were abusing and, and I mean, some of it was genocide and just horrible shit that they were doing. They, they had to make those people the villains. And how could they be the villains? I mean, so that's what's happening with Israel and Palestine. And you listen to Israel's bullshit. Apparently now they're just bombing shit like schools, and they're not even saying, oh, there was Hamas holes there. They're not even saying that shit anymore. They know that Trump is going to do their bidding no matter what, so they don't even have to pretend anymore. But, this is what I'm talking about. And we had to do some sort of community awareness project or something. And, part of the book, the most telling part of the book is when Columbus, the account of Columbus, like he came in and they went to this place, where Jamaica is, one of these island places, right? So they're not really even in what would later be called America. And they come upon one of these these islands and these island people there. And there was 280,000 of them. They were Arawaks, right? They're thriving in this tropical paradise. They're all fucking gone. Like Columbus and them killed almost every one of them. And they were extracting gold, but the place really didn't have gold. Like some of the people, they had some gold in wherever it was, and they steal all their gold, and they want them to get more. And if they didn't bring them gold, they would cut off people's hands, and they were like riding people, like people were carrying them around the island, this kind of shit, right? And Columbus, when he first looked at the people, he said, "Oh, these people are like innocent little children. With a handful of men, we could subjugate them." And a lot of this came from the Christian belief of manifest destiny, that this was God's will and white people are just superior to the rest of these people. And, they rang havoc all over this fucking place, right? And, it resonated with me. I mean, it really struck me, this stuff with Columbus. And so I had this idea to cancel Columbus Day. Like this was like, of course it wasn't going to happen, but that was what our project was. And a few people were, wanted to do the project with me. But, all these people were reading the same book and hearing the same shit, right? But none of them cared about it as much as I did. Like, and as much as I could care about something like this. And that struck me. It's kind of the stuff like we deal with as truthers. In fact, a few people came up to me and say, yeah, I get it, but I really want to keep that day off. People were, most of the people in the school were older people with jobs, were going back to school and things. And, I started to get really frustrated with the people I was working with and, everybody else. And I kind of realized at one point, like, well, I kind of have some of the same qualities that Columbus did, right? Some of the same arrogance, some of the same force, I could see it in myself. It was like this realization that, why am I caring about Columbus when, like, I have an inner Columbus in me. Like I have some of these same tendencies, right? Some of the same personality traits. It struck me. And then I found Saj Marg, which is about correcting those things. And then over the next period of time, it became very clear to me that, because I started working in this treatment center with these kids that were little, sex offenders and just, horrible people. And, the whole environment of counseling. And as I, would work through this for years, and that I would see that you can't help people and change them. That's why I say I'm in the change business. But, the only change that I can control is my personal change. And I've given up changing other people. I mean, it's just something that I don't even consider. Like I barely will say anything anymore unless it's my duty to say something, because almost never results in people. The only way people change is if they do what I did in this circumstance, is you recognize something inside of you that you don't like and you work to get rid of it. And then you have a method to do so, which is the cleaning method in Sajmark's system. I mean, that to me is the best method. People change without that method. If you really want to change, but really the only real change is if you are contacting God in some way. And you don't even have to think about God as like the word God, but like you connect with something that's divinity, even if you're an atheist, you can connect with divinity and not call it that. And there's some element of just like a real deep feeling I want to be better. Because personal change is really difficult, right? And so for me, in terms of all these pieces of shit that now pollute the truth community and all the rest of these other people, they're not looking at themselves and saying they need to change something. It doesn't matter if they fire Pete Hegseth or, Trump resigns or Trump get his or the mainstream media gets theirs or any of these things. What really matters is people realize that they have to change. Like we all have to change. Like what we're doing is like an absolute abomination of God's creation. Like we're the worst versions of ourselves, at least not a good version. I mean, some people are worse than others, but like all of us have to do better. Like this isn't acceptable, right? What we're creating here, what we've manifested collectively and individually isn't acceptable. And instead of looking at everyone else going, wow, look at how bad these people suck, and they do suck. Like it's easy to point out suckiness because it's just right there for you to point out. It's like one of the easiest things to do, right? But it's really hard for people to, look inside themselves and see that they have some of these same qualities. Remember, I talked about this with Alec Baldwin. Like Alec Baldwin hates Trump and mocked Trump, but his impression of Trump was just his own exaggerated tendencies. Alec Baldwin's own exaggerated tendencies. I mean, I saw this early on. Like this is long before his wife's scandal. Like I didn't even know she was from Boston. I didn't know anything about her then. And, I didn't know much about Alec, but he was shitting on Trump, and I realized he hates Trump because he's just like him. Just like Biden was just like Trump, and Trump was just like Biden. These people are all the same, and they hate each other because, deep down they know they're pieces of shit, but they can't look at themselves and see what they are. So they only, look at other people that are exactly like them, and they hate them, right? And hatred is almost always like that. You can only hate in other people what you hate in yourself. Like if you see something that you hate in other people, then you find out whatever that is in your system, you throw it out because they're the object of your hate, right? Your hate is generated at yourself, right? Hatred is always self-hatred. It's just projected at an external object. And so, like all these people that are out there that are, pretending to be truth tellers, you can only be a truth teller if you're willing to look at your own bullshit, right? Like you have to confront your own bullshit. You have to, it doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be, it just has to be done, right? It has to be. And if you're doing that, then you're going to look at these other people in a much more generous way, in a lighter way, because, you see your own imperfection. Like, you might not be nearly as bad as these people, but you kind of get it. Like you get where people go south. It only takes a few bad breaks, a bad upbringing, or just a few, you could easily see people, your own life, going south. Like, if things had gone differently for you. I mean, everyone should be like grateful that, something that like is too much for you to bear doesn't happen to you that just crushes you. Because it's easy to get crushed. Like people get crushed in life all the time. Like there's things that just are too much for you to handle. And then you just go south, like people just go to the dark side. It isn't that hard for a person to get turned to the dark side. It doesn't take all that much. And, it happens. And it could be something that lures you in. It could be something traumatic. It could be, angry at God. just, whatever it is. Like, and, you see it. Most people, the light has been extinguished from their, it's almost non-existent. They just in the sense that you have to have a soul to live. But their spiritual essence and the best part of them is almost just, it's like, when you snuff out a candle and a little bit of the wick glows for a little bit, most people, that's their level. Maybe even less than that. Just a dying ember in their soul, and they're just walking around like fucking zombies. And so, the only thing that's keeping them from going to the dark side is they don't have any energy left to they don't have any fight left in them to do any real damage. But, they've just been so twisted in a godless world that's, I won't say godless, but, a God against, a world that's against God, and does everything as possible to diminish the divine essence in everything and everybody. And so that's where we are as a people. And so, all this bullshit that you see, like all this stuff that's in the fucking truth community now. And I mean, again, I'm not watching it, but I'm just talking about the people who are pro-Trump and, who won't take accountability for, just a massive swing and a miss on the people who supported Trump, who it's one thing if you felt scared and you didn't want to say Trump's assassination attempt was bullshit and that Trump's a piece of shit. Like, for whatever reason, you didn't want to lose your viewers or, whatever reason that you couldn't say it, like you were a little bit scared, but you didn't have to celebrate his fucking failure and the fakeness of his assassination attempt, these other things. It's one thing to just be like, all right, yeah, I already not being sure of yourself and not whatever reason that you couldn't rise up to the moment and call bullshit on the whole thing, the whole Trump, the debacle. I mean, I don't know. Each person has their own story. But it's one thing to be silent. It's another thing to just out and out shill for some piece of shit that anybody that has some real truther in them would have to say, take a hard pass, right? Like, you can't shill for that shit. You can't endorse that shit. It was bad. Like, you knew this was coming. I mean, no one knew exactly what Trump was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to be make America great again. It wasn't going to be anything close. Like, that wasn't going to happen. It couldn't happen even if he was great, but it wasn't going to happen because he's not great. Like, he has no chance of doing anything. He's a complete fucking grifter, right? He's just a grifter from head to toe. And, and he's so much more that's more despicable than that. So, I mean, maybe he's a little bit funny. He's got a little bit of charm, a little personality. I mean, that's like, which is almost non-existent at this point. And no longer, should be appealing based on everything else we know about this piece of shit and the things that he's done. He's done legitimate things to harm people. Like I often say, this thing sounds bad, but it hasn't happened yet. But Operation Warp Speed, right? Someone sent me a video of some guy saying that they're not paying out life insurance if you took the bloop because, and again, I've heard that before, but I mean, people have suffered from Operation Warp Speed and Trump. So that was number one. Then closing down the economy and now the tariffs. There's a long list of things that he's done that's actually hurt people, in ways that, not just like a few people, but lots of people. And there's things that are going to get worse over time. And he's still at it, right? So, and again, I think he's doing God's work because the system has to come down, even though he's not doing it consciously. So there's always that. But, that's where, like, it's a good thing that the system comes down. Of course, we're going to suffer materially, but spiritually, like I said, we have spiritual poverty here, and that's going to change because, the materialism is blocking our spiritual, our desire, our internal yearning to find God because we're distracted and we're, pulled in by the beast. So that's, ultimately, that's a good thing. So destroying the country is doing God's work. It's part of a divine plan, right? It has to be. It's a divine contingency. But, you can't endorse him doing it, right? Like, even though it's going to have good results, who he is as a person and the way he's behaving and the things that he's proposing, you just can't get behind it. Like, you can say what I'm saying, that he's doing God's work, but at the same time, he's an arrogant piece of shit that's running the country into the ground and causing the suffering of, millions upon millions of people, billions of people around the world. Like, it's heading towards World War III, whatever else fucking ends up happening. And, it's not going to be because of him. It's going to be because it needs to happen. But he's the guy that's, he's the face of it, right? Like, he's the face of this, the end of our, civilization as we now know it. Which, like I said, is a good thing, but also, you can't, like, say, hey, go do this, right? You can't vote for that shit. You have to at least acknowledge, like, you can say, yeah, it's a good thing in terms of what happens next and what is necessary. So that's true. But you can't, vote for your own self-destruction, right? Like, it's just, or destruction of this, everything, like what it means. You can't endorse it. Like, you see it and you say, yeah, this is supposed to happen. But I'm not going to be like, yeah, go do it. Like, again, and these people aren't voting for him or praising him because they think that destruction's a good thing. They're doing it because they believe in his bullshit, which is like just embarrassing. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's bar vital, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.